first point to make, right, is that different business objectives are going to drive different pricing strategies. And that's a critical point for us to really focus on today. And let's actually, let's do an example to walk through that and talk about why that is. Everybody see my screen? Very good. All right. So, hypothetical example to illustrate this, right? Let's imagine that we have two companies, and for all intents and purposes, these two companies are exactly the same. They have exactly the same product. They serve exactly the same customers, the same market, the same dynamics around there. They're about the same size. Their product roadmaps look exactly identical. Imagine they are, though, completely separate, so they're not competing with each other. They just have the same situation twice over. The only difference between these two companies, Company A and Company B, is that Company A's sole focus is maximizing its customer acquisition rate, and Company B's sole focus is maximizing its profit margin. You can see here I've got 4 different areas of pricing strategy here. So we've got price level, the number of choices that we give them, the transparency, the degree of transparency that they use within their pricing, and their overall policy on price increases. How would you expect there to be differences across the companies given their different objectives? What do you guys think? No takers? All right, well, I think the first one's a gimme, right, in price level. Let's go through that one very quickly. So Company A, for price level, they're going to try and price as low as they possibly can, right? Because if they're interested in is maximizing the customer acquisition, they want to be able to position the price level of their product at a point where it is beneath the willingness to pay for as many customers as possible, so it doesn't become a barrier to adopting it. It wouldn't actually probably be 0, because a lot of times actually there are certainly some markets where companies will assume that if the price level is not at a certain level, the quality can't be good. So you'd always want it to be something, but it's going to be low, and probably low relative to what a lot of customers would pay for it. Company B, however, if their sole focus is maximizing profit margin, they are incentivized to make it as high as possible, because they don't really care about how many customers they would sell to. They just care about getting the highest price with the best profit margin they can for those companies that they do sell to. So they'd go high. So right off the bat, low and high, so very, very different. Number of choices. Well, Company A, again, they're trying to maximize the rate of customer acquisition. And when you're trying to maximize the rate of customer acquisition, you want your pricing strategy to be simple. You want to make it as easy as possible as it can be to make a buying decision. And the more choices that you have, the more difficult that becomes. There's actually a lot of behavioral economic studies that have been done that show that as you increase the number of options and the number of choices that a customer has, there's actually less chance of them buying anything at all. So if you're really trying to look to get people to just adopt the product straight off, you want to have a few choices. And again, similar to price level, few is better than just one here, because one choice actually feels like a take it or leave it, and then people might not feel that they're actually getting what they want or what they need. If you have a couple of simple choices, maximizes the ability to be able to think, I've chosen something that works for me. Company B, on the other hand, right, again, they're not interested in making quick decisions. They just want to make sure that when they do sell, they sell at the maximum value. So they would actually want to have a lot of choices. They want to have lots of different options so that they can monetize every single one of those separately. So they'd have many choices. Again, completely different. Transparency. So again, Company A, maximizing customer acquisition. If you want to maximize the chance of somebody making a decision right then, you want to be as transparent as you can with your pricing, so they can see what it costs, and they can compare it to other options that they have. We've actually done studies at Monovate and found out, particularly in B2C and SMB markets, there's about 75% of customers who say that they wouldn't even consider a vendor if they couldn't go onto their website and see what their price was. So if you really want to maximize the amount of customers you're getting, you do need to be transparent with your pricing. However, company B, they're looking into maximizing profitability. So what they want to do is to be able to price as close to the willingness to pay of each individual customer. And their best strategy for doing that is actually not to say what their price is, try to get a conversation with that customer, figure out their needs, figure out what they're trying to use it for, figure out as much as they can about the customer that would be paid its willingness to pay, and then price specifically to that. So they'd want to be an opaque pricing strategy where they really don't give the price level until they're ready to actually give a very specific quote. And then price increase policy year over year. I mean, really, if company A, if all they were interested in was maximizing customer acquisition, their pricing increase policy should be they don't ever increase prices, right? That gives the customer who's coming on complete certainty. This is the price. It's never going to go up. You don't have to worry about this spiraling past your willingness to pay at some point in the future. So they have nothing. Obviously, for company B, they would be leading into the fact that you would expect that as customers get into the product, use it more, they're going to start to receive more and more value. Therefore, they want to be setting quite a relatively high price increase year over year to be able to maximize that extra value. That doesn't mean they can go crazy and double it, triple it, but they would probably, within reasonable bounds, make it a relatively aggressive price increase year over year. So we started off this conversation around this talking about that these companies were exactly the same in every way apart from their objectives, right? And really, because these two have completely different objectives, the right pricing strategy for them across these different levels is completely different. So it's a hypothetical example. It's actually very rare that a company would actually be so singularly focused on customer acquisition or maximizing profit. Talk a little bit more about that later on, because you can have trade-offs. But it is true that you're going to have a set of objectives, and there might be ones of different priority, and therefore you really need to think about the trade-offs between them in order to build a pricing strategy that is going to work for your objectives. Does it make sense, anybody? Any questions or thoughts around this?
I'll kick a quick question to you. So I know on this page we don't talk about price metrics specifically, but what are your thoughts around how different price metrics might change between like a customer acquisition focused company versus like a profit margin oriented company?
That's a great question. Actually, it goes on to my next slide actually as well. So like objectives really are going to change. Your objectives are going to change the priority that you place, or the I guess the focus, the importance that you place on the different criteria which you'd use to assess a price metric, right? So at Monovate, these are the different criteria that we would use of different price metrics. So you've got value alignment, which is whether or not the metric scales the value that the customer receives. You've got growth orientation, so whether the metric tends to grow over time. And you've got auditability, which is, can I measure this? So can I have like an objective measure of price? These are all things which you would think to be more important to the vendor when you're choosing a price metric. The lighter blue ones here are the ones which are more tailored to the customer, right? Making sure the customer gets what they need. So is it acceptable? Does this seem like a fair and acceptable way to set price? Is it predictable? Can I actually guess or estimate what my value on this metric is going to be at some point in the future, and therefore can I easily estimate what my price is going to be? And scalability, similar but slightly different, right? Can I actually control my metric and therefore my price levels? So if your objective is maximizing volume, right, then the importance of those three at the bottom there, those customer things, are going to be incredibly important, because these are things that are going to dictate whether or not it's easy to make a decision. If the pricing seems fair, if I know what I'm going to be paying, if I can control it, makes me feel far more comfortable in taking that initial step and buying the product. If I'm maximizing EBITDA on the other end of that, right, you shift to completely the other end. Like those objectives of making it acceptable, predictable, scalable, less important in general, not unimportant, but less important. Value alignment, so I can charge the most that I can for the customers who are getting the most value, becomes incredibly important. Growth orientation is more important, right? Ideally, I'd like this to be able to increase over time. And auditability is super important because I want to be able to measure this metric. I want to be able to charge based on it, and that will help me get up to higher price points and higher EBITDA. Got another one as well here. So if you're maximizing revenue growth, you're somewhere in the middle across those as well, right? So you've got really the most important thing now is this growth orientation thing. If I want to boost my revenue growth, so I want to be able to get customers in maybe at a lower price point and then be able to move them up, I really need a metric that's going to be able to grow as they get more value. And then everything else there is kind of important. I'd still need value alignment for them to feel good about paying more for that metric as it grows. Still need auditability because I need to be able to charge them. And if I'm trying to maximize revenue, there's usually a volume component to revenue, and therefore all those ones that maximize the customer satisfaction are important as well. While we're talking about price structure as well, actually, let's think about packaging as well. So we'll talk about different levels of objectives a little bit later in this deck as well. But sometimes when you're setting objectives, you start off at a relatively high level. Those kind of big those company direction metrics that are really going to drive everything, and then you get to your objectives, which are a bit more targeted and specific and a bit more directly related to pricing. When you get there, you can really start these objectives influencing your packaging choice as well. So you have an objective to make sure that all your customers are getting a certain set of features. You might decide that you just, for stickiness and for growth, you just need to make sure everybody has a certain something. Then you probably need a broad base package which gives everybody access to all of those things. If that wasn't important to you, you wouldn't necessarily go with a packaging style that has this broad, wide base. If you're looking to cover the costs of services or features that are expensive to provide, probably want to be charging separately for those things to make sure that you're covering your costs, and therefore add-ons are a really great way to do that. So you might want to pick a packaging strategy that includes add-ons. You're looking to monetize use cases. So you've got different customers who are using the product for different things and presumably might have different combinations of features or capabilities that they need in order to do that. Modules become a really great way to do that. You can arrange your packaging in a modular style, which allows you to be able to do that. You're looking to drive profitability across a granular set of features, whilst at the same time maximizing customer choice. An a la carte structure where you've really got quite granular choices, lots of different options that are really aligned to these specific capabilities and features will allow you to do that. It's kind of like that strategy of maximizing EBITDA we talked about earlier. And lastly, if you're trying to maximize the rate of customer acquisition, you probably want a very simple packaging structure, which is going to make it very easy to understand, very easy to figure out exactly what you want and pull the trigger. So you might end up with a very simple tiered structure like illustrated there. So these objectives are super important in driving what your pricing strategy should be. As we've said, I think it's probably, we're very comfortable with the idea of, we need to find out what our customers want, what they need, what they're willing to pay, and do all that market research. And I think also pricing strategies tend to get pretty comfortable as well with the idea that, we need to understand the product and how it's constrained and what we can do with it and what we can't do with it and where the costs are. For whatever reason, these objectives tend to get forgotten about, but they're incredibly important really in deciding what is the right pricing strategy for you. So super important to get right.